Next I have a couple of books by the same author, and the first of those is We Are the Ants by Sean David Hutchinson. And this is another of my favourite books of all time. This is about a boy called Henry Denton, whose life is terrible. His dad left when he was a kid, his grandma has Alzheimer's, he's bullied at school, his mum is neglectful, and his brother is outright abusive. The one good thing he had was his boyfriend Jesse, and then Jesse committed suicide. So Henry is pretty understandably suffering from severe depression, and on top of that he's been routinely abducted by aliens for his entire life. And then one day the aliens abduct him with a warning that the world will end unless he presses a button to save it. But the only problem is he's not sure the world is worth saving, and he has 144 days to decide. As the premise would suggest, this is a very dark book. It's dealing heavily with depression and grief and suicide. There's also some sexual assault in here. Again, check that Google Doc for content warnings. And you would think that this is quite a dark and depressing book, but I would say that it's written with a very hopeful overtone to it. In terms of representation, Henry is, I believe, gay. I think Jesse was as well. And I believe Henry's love interest is pansexual. Like, I can't remember, but I've heard people say that he's pansexual. But I could be wrong. He could be gay, he could be bi, he could be something else. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, this is one of my favourite books of all time. If you're looking for a deep, weird read, then I highly recommend it. And the other Sean David Hutchinson book I have is At the Edge of the Universe. This is about a boy called Ozzy, whose boyfriend disappears, and Ozzy is the only one who can remember that his boyfriend ever existed, and meanwhile the universe is shrinking. This is a really great book, but not as great as We Are the Ants, in my opinion. And this is very similar to We Are the Ants. It's obviously a heavy contemporary story with a sci-fi twist. It deals with themes of mental health and depression and abuse and sexual assault and things like that. But it doesn't feel like it's treading the same ground that We Are the Ants did. It is a distinctly different story, and whereas We Are the Ants was written quite hopefully, the tone of this one is much more doubtful and uncertain, I think anyway, which makes it a completely different experience to read. Yeah, I really enjoyed this book, but not as much as We Are the Ants. I really enjoyed the characters, mostly. There were a couple that annoyed me. The plot was great, but resolved a bit unsatisfyingly, in my opinion. I should stop saying in my opinion, all of this is my opinion. But as with We Are the Ants, the sci-fi elements are more of a vehicle to explore Ozzy's mental state. In terms of representation, Ozzy is gay. His boyfriend Tommy, I believe, was also gay. His other potential love interest in this is bisexual, and there is a gender-fluid side character. Again, you should definitely check out the content warnings for this book if you have any potential triggers or just stuff you don't want to read about, because there are quite a few in here. There's some sexual abuse of a minor as well. And yeah, because this one was great as well, it sort of solidified my belief that Sean David Hutchinson will be one of my favourite authors, and I can't wait to read more of his work. Next we have my favourite book of all time, Wonders of the Invisible World by Christopher Barzak. So this is about a boy called Aidan Lockwood who is growing up in the small sleepy town of Temperance, Ohio. And Aidan is just sort of drifting through life. He has no friends or any real interests or hobbies or ambitions, and he's just going through the motions day after day. And then his best childhood friend Jared returns to Temperance after being away in Cleveland for ages. And he starts talking about things that Aidan can't remember, but definitely should, such as the strange man in the black coat that only he could see. And so the two of them decide to team up to recover Aidan's memories, and along the way they discover the history of the Lockwood family. And I think the reason that I love this book so much is because it really speaks to my soul in a way that no other book ever has. At the time I read it, I related to Aidan very strongly. I've never related more to a fictional character, I don't think. so that probably coloured my opinion of it. But that being said, it is a great book. It's creepy and atmospheric and mysterious, and it has great characters and a great plot, and it's very emotional and deep and dark, but not that dark. And I highly recommend it. In terms of representation, both Aiden and Jared are gay, I believe, and that's really all I have to say about it, except read it. Next I have Proxy by Alex London. Proxy is a YA dystopia set in a world where there are proxies, who are people who are punished for the crimes of others as a way to pay off their debts, and it follows Sid Carton, who is a proxy, who has 1 year left of proxying before he is paid off all of his debts and is free to do whatever he pleases. And then the boy that he proxies for kills someone, and Sid is sentenced to 14 years in a labour camp. This is a really great dystopian series. The first book is very much a criticism and a commentary on corporatism and capitalism and consumerism, whereas the second book goes in completely the opposite direction and critiques like communism and asceticism, which is a really interesting thing that I've never really seen another series do, to critique two completely opposing ideologies within the same series, and to split it up so evenly, or so directly. But the second book, Guardian, does lose that criticism element along the way, which is a bit of a shame, because the antagonist ends up being a bit rubbish, honestly. But if you do read this series, I would recommend also reading the epilogue short story, Daydreamer. You can get it by subscribing to Alex London's newsletter, and it is a really great epilogue for this duology, and I think it adds a lot to the story, especially in terms of fleshing out one particular character. In terms of representation, Sid is gay, there is a bisexual character, and another gay character. Also by Alex London, I have Skybound, and this is a YA high fantasy set in the land of Ustar, where everything revolves around birds of prey, and falconry is the main way of life. And it follows a pair of twins called Bryson and Kylie, who have to go into the mountains and capture a ghost eagle, which is the most important, deadly, and feared bird of prey in existence. Meanwhile, an army of religious fanatics called the Kartami, who believe the capture and training of birds is blasphemous, is marching on Ustar, intent on wiping out the falconers. So, I have only read the first book, Black Wings Beating, and I thought it was good, but it wasn't as great as I hoped for. But I think most of my problems will be answered in the second book, so I'm expecting to like this one a lot more. In terms of representation, Bryson is gay, and it seems to be implied in the first book that Kylie is aromantic, but that is not confirmed as far as I know. But it could be in the second book, I just haven't read it yet. And the conclusion to this trilogy, Gold Wings Rising, comes out this year. Next I have the Nightrunner series by Lynn Fruelling. And this is the first book, Luck in the Shadows, and I have only read the first 2 books. So this is an adult high fantasy about a boy called Alec of Kerry, who is arrested for poaching, and he helps his fellow inmate Seragil to perform a jailbreak. And Seragil decides to take him on as a travelling companion, and eventually as an apprentice, because Seragil is part of a secret spy network, and he thinks Alec has what it takes to join them. The first book, Luck in the Shadows, is very good, but there are a few quite significant problems with it that prevent it from being great. But Stalking Darkness, the second book, is amazing. It's just so atmospheric and creepy, and the romance is really well done, and the characters are great. I mean, that applies to Luck in the Shadows as well, but seriously, Stalking Darkness takes it up a notch. There are 7 books in the series, but I've only read these 2. In terms of representation, Alec and Seragil are both bisexual. There are some queer side characters who are men who like men, but their identities are not explored, so I'm not sure what they are. And there might be some queer female side characters as well, but I don't think there are yet, anyway. And I know this has a prequel series about a trans main character, so I'm quite interested in getting around to that. I think I'm going to read the whole world in publication order. But yeah, if you want fun adventure fantasy, this is a great one to pick up. Next I have The Rifter series by Jin Hale. And this is actually the first 3 books in the Rifter series, because it was originally released as serial novellas, and this is a bind-up of the first 3. The first of both the ebooks and the bind-ups is The Shattered Gates, but finding the second and third bind-ups for this for a reasonable price is going to be really difficult. This is about a man called John Toffler, who steals a key intended for his roommate Kyle, who is a strange man with tattoos on his eyelids and scars on his face. And this turns out to be a mistake, because Kyle is actually Khalil, an otherworldly warrior who has been assigned to watch John, because John is actually the Rifter, a god destined to destroy Khalil's world. This was a really great book. The characters and the world building were just excellent, and I really need to get around to reading the rest of them. In terms of representation, John and Khalil are both gay, and there might be more LGBT+ side characters, but I can't remember. I forgot to say, this is an adult portal fantasy. Next I have the Local Legends series by J. Bell. This is a YA high fantasy. This is the first book in the series, The Cat in the Cradle. So this series is basically set in this world which is ruled by oligarchs, who are mages who guard the locas, crystals of elemental power. And then someone starts assassinating the oligarchs and stealing their locas. So the blue oligarch, who is the oligarch of water, gives his loca to his son and sends him to stay with the red oligarch, Taijin, for protection, because he's scryed to see what to do. And things don't exactly go to plan. And then this second book is more of a companion novel. It does continue Dylan and Taijin's story, but it isn't very related to The Cat in the Cradle, and it has a new protagonist with a new love interest. In terms of representation, Dylan and Taijin are both gay, and the main character of the second book, Cole, is also gay, and so is his love interest. And there is a mentioned queer side character who isn't really in it, but I think that's it. But again, I could be wrong. This is a really fun series, and the romance is very cute. Next I have Release by Patrick Ness, and this is a YA urban fantasy / magical realism thing about the closeted gay son of a pastor called Adam going through a terrible day, and meanwhile the ghost of a murdered girl rises from the lake that her body was found in. This is a really great book. At least Adam's story is really great. The ghost storyline doesn't make any sense. It's so random and weird, and it doesn't relate to the other story at all, and honestly, it's just pointless. It has no business being there. But yeah, Adam's story is incredible though, and that completely saves this book, and you can just forget about the ghost story. It's weird. So it's basically a contemporary story if you forget about the ghost stuff. In terms of representation, Adam is gay, his love interest is gay, and there is a gay side character. At least I'm pretty sure they're all gay, but I'm not, like, totally certain. Next I have Tapestry by Hallie Burton, and this is a YA high fantasy romance set in a world which was, like, devastated by civil war. And after the war, it was determined that the cause of the destruction was passion and emotion. So it was determined that anything that stirred strong emotion should be banned, especially music. So this is sort of set in a strictly logical society, which is divided into castes based on ability, which creates a rather terrible class divide. And the main protagonist, Tally, is a member of the Guild of Designers, and he befriends a guildless person called Jonas, and they have to go on the run after they accidentally discover music. In terms of representation, this is set in a world without homophobia, and they do have an equivalent of same-sex marriage. The main protagonist, Tally, is gay, his love interest's sexuality is not really addressed, and there is a gay side character. There might be more, but that's all I can think of off the top of my head. This is not Own Voices, but the author is a queer woman.